Welcome to the Her Story Circle podcast, the podcast that brings you the extraordinary tales of everyday women who are changing the world. I'm your host, Gertrude Mache, and I'd like to acknowledge traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today. I also like to pay my respects to elders, past, present, and emerging. Every week, we dive into the lives, challenges, and triumphs of women from all four corners of the globe. We're here to inspire, enlighten, and connect, sharing stories that uplift and empower. So grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and join us as we explore the incredible journeys of women shaping our future. This is Her Story, where every woman's voice matters. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Her Story Circle. This is Gertrude Mache here in beautiful Melbourne, Australia. And today I am graced with the presence of yet another fascinating woman. Welcome, welcome, welcome to our tribe. Please tell everybody your full name, where you're based, and share your story with us today.
Hi, my name is Dr. Constance Scharff. I am based right at the U.S. border crossing to Vancouver, BC, so approximately 100 miles north of Seattle and 35 or 40 miles south of Vancouver. And I am a researcher of mental health. I look at the intersection of addiction and trauma and climate change. I've become very interested recently in the past, 10 years in how do people in remote communities, some of the most remote and marginalized communities in the world, how do they address mental health in the face of adversity, particularly climate change and conflict? But I didn't come to that interest out of nothing. I actually experienced a significant amount of trauma when I was a young person, a lot of childhood abuse, and I developed complex PTSD and alcoholism. And I was really prepared to die, to drink myself to death. But the person who abused me died suddenly when I was 22. And I really saw that as a turning point. I saw that as an opportunity to do something different with my life, not just to succumb to addiction, because alcoholism at that point numbed all the pain. Because part of the problem with PTSD, with post-traumatic stress, is that there's this constant living in the past. You're living in that past abuse. And so at that point, I decided to get healthier, get into recovery, and also to find the complementary therapies, the supportive therapies, especially in the United States. All healthcare, let alone mental health care, is very expensive. To find those therapeutics that are deeply supportive, accessible, and very often free or very low cost. And so that's what I've dedicated my life to, is to find that information. I worked for an addiction treatment facility as their director of addiction research for several years. And when I would go to give a presentation in some other part of the world, I would schedule myself so that I could go to remote areas and work with Indigenous populations by and large to learn from them about how it is that they face adversity, how they face challenges, because you see in these populations that they don't necessarily get collective trauma. And that's what I was interested in. So for the past several years, I have been working on that research. I founded the Human Resilience Project. And through the Human Resilience Project, I am now undertaking a 10-nation, 3-year study of human resilience to look at what it is that's common to all of us. It's a combination of psychology and anthropology, but how is it that human beings in very, very different situations collectively as communities face adversity and how they become resilient. So that's really who I am and where I'm from.
Let's now delve into digging into your backstory
Sure.
and, where were you born? Did you end up having children? Who is Constance? What is your backstory?
Oh, sure. So I was born in Fresno, California. It's in California's Central Valley. The, uh, it really is the farm belt of the United States. I mean, it is where a lot of produce comes from. I am Jewish, and my family decided to be pig farmers, which was not the most likely decision someone would make. And surprise, surprise, that wasn't the only challenging decision that my parents made when I was growing up. I have never wanted to be married. And I am very fortunate to come from a family and live in a place where that was not a requirement for me. I didn't want to go to the prom. I didn't want to get married. I wasn't interested in boyfriends. I wanted to be an anthropologist and a writer. And I'm essentially a medical anthropologist and a writer. That is what I do now. But no, I didn't. I also didn't want children. And I think that's really important because in order to be a good parent, it doesn't matter your cultural background. In order to be a good parent, you have to give your children time. I have not wanted to devote my time to children, to a spouse, to a partnership. I've always wanted to do my work. My interest is in meeting other people, in learning about their cultures, and in learning about how, in solidarity with one another, we can create situations in which we are all uplifted. That really has been my goal. So I came from a family where it was pretty much expected that you would go to college. Um, when I said, hey, I want to go to graduate school, the answer was okay. When I said I want to be a writer, the answer was, why don't you quit your job and write a novel for a year? I mean, I have had nothing but support to do things that are not necessarily traditional uh, gender roles. And so that really is my background. I do have 2 cats and a dog. All of them together weigh 30 pounds, and they take up a California king size bed. I don't know how 3 little guys do it, but they do. Gertrude, I can't hear you.
Looks like I was muted.
Yes, there you go.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. Now, you founded the Human Resilience Project.
Yeah.
What was the spark behind its creation, and what vision drives your work today?
What a great question. So, the Human Resilience Project, not only did I come from trauma, and but I am fascinated by other cultures. I want to know why you do the things that you do, how you do them, what is important to you. That has just always been fascinating to me. Some people when they travel are like, well, what do you eat? I mean, what you eat is fine. Some things I like, some things I don't, but it's really who you are and how you see the world. And I also received a lot of kindness from people in very, very remote communities, very far flung situations, who, when I was much younger, saw me and recognized how traumatized I was and really helped me to become present in my body, in the space, and really interact with them as fully as I could. I was 17 years old and I was invited in Oregon to a powwow, and it was put on by the Siletz tribe. And I went, it was my Girl Scout troop that was invited, and I went, and a woman invited me to sit at her drum circle. Now, I'm not native. Like, that's not, I don't pretend that that's who I am by any stretch, but to be included. And I didn't really know how to drum, and I was off sometimes. And the patience that she and all the rest of them on the drum circle showed me, it was, more than any time in my life, I felt seen. I felt appreciated. I was okay for who I was. And I was like, oh, why is this happening here and not in other places? That isn't a general American situation. And so that really piqued my interest. How do we see other people and how do we interact with them? That's really what I wanted.
Wow. Now, why do you believe it's important to integrate Indigenous knowledge and non-Western therapies into mainstream mental health care?
So I want to be really clear. I do not believe in appropriation. So I'm not going to take your ritual, your way ceremony, your way of doing things, and plop it into, say, an addiction treatment program. And you do see that. You will see, for example, sweat lodges being done at different addiction treatment facilities for non-Indigenous people. And I think that's both inappropriate, and I don't think it's very effective. I haven't seen it have great efficacy. What I am interested in is, what are the commonalities? Because if you see the same idea, the same type of thing being done culture to culture to culture, then that tells me there's something about the humanness of it. So, for example, storytelling, I've been to more than 40 nations. I have yet to find a cultural group that does not use storytelling in some way. And so that indicates to me, stories might be important. Whereas it's very Western to use medications, right? You have a symptom, we're going to give you a pill. That's a very Western way of looking at it and doesn't have the same kind of efficacy that working on a story does. So one of the things that I've noticed in addiction treatment, for example, is that if you tell yourself you can't, you can't. And very often, I would say far and away, most of the time, people who come into addiction treatment, they say, "Doc, I'm lost. I can't. I'm a dead man. There's nothing you can do." The first thing we have to address is that story. The first thing we have to address is this idea that I can't, I'm lost, I'm already dead. Right? And so I've gotten to observe this in other cultures, in other places around the world, to see how they do it different. And by being constantly challenged with a different worldview. And when I say challenged, I don't mean in a negative way, but just really in my face, how I see the world is not how these different groups see the world. It forces me to be more what we would call in neuroscience plastic, right? I have to be willing to change the way I see things in order to get a different outcome. And so that's really what I love, is I'm looking for the humanity. So when I go to different cultures, I'm always working with someone, an anthropologist, a historian, someone else who's already there and is already doing a study, because I'm not there to find out what makes you, whether you're Maori or Hawaiian or Inuit. Irrelevant to me what the specific uniqueness is. I want to take the meta perspective, the bigger perspective, step back and say, how are we all human, and how does that inform how we can respond to adversity? That's where I'm coming from.
Dang. Very unique perspective. Now, in your research, what are some of the unique or surprising practices that you've encountered that could benefit global approaches to trauma recovery?
So I think a better understanding of storytelling far and away is the most important.
Yeah.
But I think in terms of unique or unexpected, at least in the West, we vastly underuse music,
Okay.
movement, and ritual or ceremony. We don't have, by and large, at least in, sort of standard American culture, we don't
Mm-hmm.
have those things anymore. One of the problems with being a melting pot, Australia is one, the United States is one, Canada is one, where you come to us and you are expected to become American, become Australian, become Canadian, as opposed to really maintaining your cultural identity. Here, you're, an asterisk, you're a, you know, an Italian American. So you have a hint of your culture, but you are
Yeah.
really expected to be American. And so we're looking so we don't have that. But music, and I wrote a book about this, Rock to Recovery. Music has an astounding impact, positive impact on the brain. So if you
Mm-hmm.
sing or hum, and remember, your brain does not know whether or not you're good at it. That's a judgment.
Mm-hmm.
Your brain only knows that you've done it. So if
Mm.
you use music, it lights up the whole brain. You will see a positive impact on your mental health. So for example, if you're having a bad day and you're stuck in traffic in Melbourne is not a joke. So, if I go to Melbourne a lot. I love Melbourne. So, uh, you know, it's not a joke. If you're stuck in traffic and you turn on the radio and you sing along to a song that, like, you don't care if anyone's listening, do your own carpool karaoke, you'll feel
Yeah.
better, because singing drops serotonin, oxytocin, and dopamine into the brain. This is the Western
Yeah.
science part of it. That's what we get to contribute as the science part. Serotonin, oxytocin, and dopamine, feel good chemicals.
Yeah.
So if you've had a bad day, you're going to get a little bump by singing to the radio, right? And most of us have had that experience. But now let's apply that in an addiction treatment setting. So you come with someone who's just been detoxed, so their brain is not producing those feel good chemicals. They go from the basement to the attic. They
Right.
are all of a sudden naturally high. They not only feel better, they are more motivated in treatment. They're more likely to stay in treatment. They have more ability and willingness to communicate in the
Mm.
treatments so we see better outcomes. But we learned this by and large. There are a few good, good researchers out there in the West who've been doing this. But why is it that nearly all the cultures, not all, but nearly all the cultures, use some sort of music, some sort of dance, some sort of ritual? One of the
Mm-hmm.
things that I love is whenever I go to Istanbul is one of my favorite cities. Whenever
Right.
I go to Istanbul, I love to see the Sufis. Now, this is a performance for
Wow.
tourists, right? It is not, you are not engaged in that closed ritual, but they're very clear. They're like, this is also like a religious act, and, no cameras, and don't record it, and don't, go to the bathroom, and all of that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it is astounding, right? What state they can get into, which I've
Yeah.
also seen in the Bushman shamans with their trances in Namibia and Botswana, and you see it
Yeah.
in South America with traditional healers there. So you see this so often, and so I'm like, huh, why don't we learn from that? And it isn't
Mm.
something that we can just, like I said, you can't just take a san uh, ceremony and dump it into a Canadian addiction treatment facility or trauma treatment facility and expect good outcomes. But we can learn from the commonalities. Why does
Yeah.
everyone use music? Why does everyone use story? Why does everyone use movement? One of the things
Mm.
I'm very excited about, in the West, we call it eco psychology, right?
Right.
But it's this idea of get outside, that if you stay in your house, locked in your room, rotting in your bed, you're not going to feel good. And your
Mm.
depression or your anxiety or whatever is going to tank, right? It's going to get
Yes.
worse and worse. But the Japanese, for example, have forest bathing, right? Where you go and
Okay.
you walk in the woods, right? I don't I I can't tell you of anyone who says stay at home. Don't go for a walk. Don't lie in the grass. Don't, smell the rain. Like nobody says that. Why don't we do that more? Well, because it's inconvenient and it's free. Doesn't cost you anything to go to the
Doesn't
park.
cost you anything.
Well,
No.
but that's a problem in the American system because the American system is a for-profit medical system. So why would I want to tell you something as a conglomerate, not as a specific, caregiver, but as a
Yeah.
medical conglomerate? I'm not going to tell you how you can get better without spending any money. I got bills. You got to pay them, right? So there
Yeah.
are wonderful, wonderful things. And on a personal note, I love the reciprocity. I love the sharing because
Okay.
I don't go out to these communities with the expectation that they're going to do anything, share anything that I'm invited in always. I don't go anywhere
Right.
uninvited, but it is a sharing process. And I
Yeah.
love when they want to know something about me that they find hilarious or important. It doesn't make any difference. It's that
Yeah.
interpersonal connection that I find so beautiful, especially with communities that
Love
most
it.
people don't ever get to visit.
Yeah. Yeah. And you get to experience all of that through your travels. That's
All
just
of it.
fascinating. Now, your upcoming book, A Year of Living Bravely,
Yes.
explores everyday bravery. What does bravery mean to you personally?
So I came to this book because a woman I knew in addiction recovery died.
Okay.
And while she died of complications of long COVID, she had been struggling with relapse, and that is she already had a compromised medical condition, and that probably was an exacerbating factor.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when she passed, I spoke to her mother, and her mother said to me, "What is it that you know, loved or appreciated about my daughter?" And immediately
Mm.
came to mind was she was so brave. She never gave up. She was always trying to recover. She was always trying to get better. She was always trying to make a difference in someone else's life.
Right.
And it struck me that I said that about her because people say that about me all the time. And I'm like, "Oh,
Mm.
well, thank you." I mean, when someone compliments you, I say thank you. But I'm like, is that true? And it is. And so what I wanted to look at is we understand courage in the form of the fireman runs into the burning building, right?
Yeah.
Or the mother can pick up and have a heavy object that she couldn't normally pick
Save
up
a
to
child.
right, save her child, right? So, okay, that's something different. What does it mean? And why is it important for us to challenge the daily norms that keep us from living our best lives? So, for example, one of
Mhm.
the places that I went to was New Zealand
Right.
to look at the Maori and what they are doing to ensure that the treaty that they have
The future of Watangi. Yeah.
mhm, is upheld. And
Yeah.
I got to go there at a wonderful period where it was the big push to knock it back. And I have to say, I was a little confused before I went over. I went over actually from Geelong, from Melbourne area. And
Okay.
I went over and the Maori kept saying, "Well, we have a treaty, we have a treaty, we have a treaty." And of course, what I realized is that the British don't generally make treaties.
No.
They usually come in and they colonize a place, they take
Okay.
it over, and that's the end of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I'm an American. America almost always makes treaties. Like we have hundreds of treaties with, I think it's 200 and it's a lot of treaties with Native American groups, and we have abrogated all of them. And so when I got my head around it, I was like, oh, guys, you need to don't look at Britain. You guys keep
Yeah.
looking at Britain and what Britain does. You need
Not
to look
the
at the United
example.
States. It's not the example. You need to look at the United States and see what happens to groups when treaties are set aside.
Yeah.
And so that's the kind of thing that I get to, that's a little knowledge nugget that I get to, and they can do what they want with it because there's no such thing as a white savior. I can't save nobody's nothing, but I can say, oh, wait a minute. Have you looked at it from this perspective? Because I don't come from this area of the world. And let me tell you how badly this has gone for people in my
Yeah.
country. That's what I get to give.
Wow. There's still a lot of work to be done in post-colonial countries. Colonization did a lot of damage.
Yeah.
Now, you also often speak about the intersection between climate change and mental health.
Yes.
How are the communities that you work with experiencing and addressing this intersection?
Well, I think to me, this is one of the most interesting aspects of my work because it's all over the place. There's
Yeah.
far less commonality about that. Now, most communities in the world do not see mental health as a discrete activity or part of life. It is mental health
Right.
is part of overall health, is part of community health. It's not something that's discrete. So I use that term for a Western audience. It's not exactly what's happening.
Right.
What has fascinated me is that what I'm observing very often is that the cultures, when we talk about climate change in the West, we mostly are talking about how do we have technological changes. There could be some lifestyle changes, right? So you buy an
Mhm.
electric car instead of a gas car, and then we find, or we switched from wood to plastic, and now we got
Mhm.
plastic in the ocean, right? So we switched to plastic, so there wasn't deforestation, and now we've got plastic in the oceans and microplastics in our bodies and our brains, and it's always,
Yes.
but it's a technological solution. That's how we look at the world. What I mostly see in these cultural groups is they're looking for cultural solutions. So the Marshallese, the people from the Marshall Islands,
Yes.
they were given some information by a colleague of mine, and they were told, right, so now their islands are basically atolls. They're very, very low lying. They are almost certainly going to be submerged probably
Mm.
by 2030 is what it's looking like.
Oh,
But
wow.
years ago, they were told, right, here are some technological solutions. And they listened politely for a little bit to, several of the options that they were being given. Again, Westerners coming in to save the day. Doo, 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 doo.
Mhm.
I think of Dudley Doolittle and the Royal Canadian Mounties. Anyways, so the Mounted Police. Anyways, so at a certain point, they interrupted this colleague of mine. They said, right, so none of these solutions are Marshallese. Like none of them are island solutions. And he was confused. He's like, what are you talking about? They said, listen, and I love this. We came here on boats. We can leave here on boats. In other words, all right, so sometimes islands sink.
Yes.
They were looking for a Marshallese solution.
Listen, yeah.
The island of Tuvalu, the island nation of Tuvalu, is being given uh, citizenship, is moving to New Zealand.
Right.
Kiribati is going to Australia. Australians going to take them. Tuvalu is going to take Tuvalu is going to Aotearoa. So they were being told, we'd love to relocate you on the South Island. Now, if you've been to New Zealand, the South Island has lots of room.
Yes, yes.
It has lots of sheep. It's also almost completely deforested, right?
Yeah.
The fern, forests are
Well
gone.
done.
And, but they said, there's lots of room. We would love to take you. Thank you so much. And they said, whoa, 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 whoa. Thank you, no. Look on a map. The South Island is practically to Antarctica. That's where
It's a very cold place.
it's like Scotland, which I love, but they don't. They're like,
No,
we're a tropical culture.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
not the place for us. And of course, God bless the government of New Zealand. They said they didn't get it because they said, no, because you're going to come here and become Kiwis. Same as America, right? You're going to come here and become America. And they're like, no,
Oh, thank you.
no, thank you. You know who
God.
heard them, though? The Maori.
Mhm.
They said, okay, we don't know what the solution is because now you want to be in the most populated part, and that has its own problems. But at least we get you, and this is a discussion that can be had, right? So these are the kinds of things when I say, they want cultural solutions. And God bless our current administration, not everybody wants to be us. And that's the colonial mindset, right? Is you want to be us. And
Yeah.
aren't you lucky that we are going to let you come here, or we're not going to take all your stuff, or we're not going to blow you up, or whatever our problem of the day is, make you the 51st state, wink, wink. So, that's what we're up against. And I love being
Wow.
reminded all the
Yeah.
time, 'cause, right, I live in a culture, right? You live in a culture. And also, I love being reminded that, oh, wait, some other people have really, really good ideas. We
Yeah.
could on a boat, we could leave on a boat. Well, that solves
It's
a lot of
so
problems,
practical. It's simple too.
right?
Oh my gosh, we have to
So
be constantly learning. Constance,
exactly.
I
So
could
I love
talk
it.
to you forever. Thank you so much for coming online and sharing your story with us today.
Thank you.
Amazing work that you're doing. Thank you. And thank you to everybody who tuned in. The Her Story Circle is not just a podcast. We're a social impact movement that brings you the stories and voices of women from all over the world. We share our stories to uplift you, inspire you, educate you, and take you from where you are now to where you're trying to go. So tune in again tomorrow when I interview yet another amazing guest. In the meantime, have a fantastic day, morning, or evening, wherever you are in the world. And bye for now. Thanks again, Constance.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning into the Her Story Circle podcast. I hope today's story has inspired you to believe in the power of our stories and the difference you can make in the world when you use your voice. I'm Gertrude Mache, and it's been an honor to share this space with you, where voices from all walks of life come together to weave a rich tapestry of diverse perspectives. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast to help us share these stories with more listeners. Follow us on social media by looking for the Her Story Circle podcast for more updates. And join us tomorrow for another episode filled with courage, resilience, and empowerment. Remember, your story matters, and together we're building a stronger, more inclusive world. Until next time, keep making her story.